This conference will now be recorded.
So apparently there was an issue with the audio of the recording from last Tuesday, so I'm going to re-record this. It's going to be a little bit briefer. I went through the exercises with the students who were present with me. You can go through most of these on your own. What this particular lesson is it's an introduction to, kind of ironically, English. Bill Mounds, who is one of the most talented teachers that I've ever seen, wrote the book that we're going to be using as our textbook. One of the things about his particular book and his particular style and as many students that he's taught, he's noticed that the biggest issue and the biggest problem that most people have learning the Greek language is not that they don't understand Greek, it's that they don't really understand English. To understand what we're learning about Greek grammar, you have to understand English grammar pretty well. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to understand it pretty well, because whenever I say, oh, the dative is very similar to the English indirect object, you have to understand what an indirect object is in order for that sentence to mean anything to you. So we're going to briefly go over English nouns. We're going to do it just a little bit on verbs, and he kind of adds a little bit more with verbs as he goes throughout. This semester, we're not going to do much with verbs. Most of it's going to be focused on nouns. We are going to learn a me, I think, in about the 6th or 7th lesson. So we're going to learn one verb, which means I am. But it's not going to be something that we spend a lot of time on. The way that I've broken this down, we've taken the normal 2-semester class that you would have at an undergraduate level, and I've broken it down basically into 3.5 or 4, depending on how you want to look at it. Okay, so we're going to start out by doing just a little bit of English grammar to get people caught up who maybe you had trouble in English whenever you were younger, maybe just haven't taken English in so long that you've forgotten some of the rules. We're going to briefly go over those. And I'll tell you that this is going to be helpful for any time that you need to do anything with language, because you have to know these in English in order to be able to function in other languages, Hebrew, if you want to learn Akkadian, Spanish, whatever you're looking at. All right, so inflection is a term that we have in English, but we don't use it a whole lot. So there's 2 different functions that a word can have in English. It can be the subject or it can be the object. It points out this is a direct object, so it's a special type of object. It can be the subject or the object, okay? And sometimes possessive, although those are kind of in a way like adjectives. But in general, they can either be a subject, the person doing an action, she is my daughter, or it can receive the action, I love her. So the first thing you got to think about is the function. Second is meaning. He and she are my children. This man stayed and those men left. So the difference between he and she is the difference between male and female. The difference between man and men is one man versus 2 or more. Okay, so we inflect to display meaning. First we do function, then we do meaning. English is not very highly inflected. In fact, the closest thing we have to something being inflected is the pronouns. So you have he did something, I gave something to him. So he, whenever it's receiving, it's him. Okay. The inflection is called a case, which is a change in function. Okay. Different functions are cases. He points out here this is a simplification because each of the cases can have more than one meaning or more than one function. So I pointed out to somebody that in the Wallace grammar, which is kind of the main advanced grammar that's used by most people, the Wallace grammar has over 40 uses of the genitive. So it has something to do with function, but it's not just function. All right, and he points out here, English nouns can be subjective. Kirsten went to college. The dog ate my shoe. So it's the thing that is doing the action of the verb. You can see here it's usually going to be the first noun or pronoun. Usually. Sometimes you'll have prepositions before, but usually it's going to be the first noun or pronoun. And it answers who or what does the action of the verb. Second, you have the possessive. The possessive can be expressed in two different ways. You notice here it can be of the teacher, so of the blank, that would be a possessive, or you can use an apostrophe S. Some words have it built into it, primarily the pronouns. You can see here that his implies possession, even though it doesn't have the apostrophe, it doesn't have of. And this is my reminder to everyone. Its is it is. Its, without the apostrophe, is possessive. So the object receives the action, particularly the direct object receives the verb. So the pastor helped him. Okay, so this is the direct object. This is the one who received the action. The help was received by him. You can see here it generally follows the verb and answers what or whom receives the action. There's other things that come into play. So you have singular, plural. So here we have students. It's two or more, like that student, which is one. We also have gender. So you have he, which is always going to be masculine, it, which is always going to be neuter, and her, which is always going to be feminine. Natural gender is going to follow whatever it actually is. So man is male, woman's female, rock is neuter. There's a few words that actually, in Greek, they have gender, even though we would normally not associate gender with them. Normally we think of them as neuter. A good example is church. Ecclesia. Okay, so the alpha at the end tells us that it's feminine. So whenever somebody refers to the church as a her, it goes back to this. All right, so a declension is a Greek term, but Mounce has kind of pointed out here, we do have this same idea in English to some degree. So he calls it patterns of inflection, as different ways to make things plural. So you see, most of the time we add just an S to the end. So book plus S equals books. Okay, that's one way to make something plural. But you also see that men goes from, so man goes to men. Children, child goes to children. But he points out here, it doesn't actually change the meaning at all. So if child was a word, it would mean the same thing as children, but it's not a word. So whether something is first declension, second declension, third declension, it doesn't actually change the meaning of terms in Greek. It just changes the way that you change the endings. Okay, the pattern is different. So we're going to have one group that follows one pattern. You can kind of think about that as the S pattern, with book plus S equals books. We're going to have another one that follows a different pattern. You can think of it as this one. We have another one that follows a still different pattern. And also, he points out here that moose doesn't change the same way that you would expect it to. So goose goes to geese. You can see here moose does not go to meese. So you're going to have some words that look like they should follow one declension, but they don't follow it, and they follow a different one. those are ones that we will point out specifically. I don't offhand remember any of those being this semester. I think there's something next semester that's kind of similar to what this is representing. All right, so going through the parts of speech. A noun stands for something. It is a person, place, or thing, sometimes an idea. Okay. An adjective modifies a noun or an adjective. So the dark brown Bible cost too much. Brown modifies Bible, dark modifies brown. Brown is modifying a noun, dark is modifying an adjective. Preposition, it expresses a relationship between items. It can, and usually is, it's usually spatial. So the Bible is under the table. Temporal, after playing basketball. So when after playing basketball, we'll study. A preposition, a prepositional phrase consists of a preposition, and object of a preposition. So the preposition will usually begin it, and the object will usually be the end of it. And all those words together is a prepositional phrase. The words in between are also part of the prepositional phrase that are monitored, that are modifiers. This also introduces the idea of the subject and predicate. So the subject is the noun that's doing the action of the sentence, and the words modifying it. The predicate is the verb that it's doing, and all the words that are modifying it. The simple subject is going to be the noun, the main noun. The noun is the simple subject. You also have a simple predicate, which is the verb. Okay. Other parts of speech are the article. You have the definite article, which is the. You also have the indefinite article, which is a or an. There is no indefinite article in Greek, so it's always going to be the. Sometimes we use a to make the sentence make more sense, but just so you're aware, you should not be making arguments based on the presence or an absence of a. All right. Chapter 15 is when the verbs start. He does kind of go through here the idea of a first person, second person, and third person. So first person is whenever the person speaking is included in the group, so either I or we. Second person is you or you all. Third person is talking about something that's kind of foreign to whatever conversation is going on, so he or they. First person, I or we. Second person, you or you all. Third person, he or they. We kind of went through this. So grapho is I write. Graphes is you write. Graphe is he, she, or it writes. Graphemen is we write. I'm not sure why he didn't continue this, but grapheta is you all write. And graphusen or graphusi, depending on it depends on which is the next letter in the sentence, whether or not this will be there, is they write. Okay, so first person, second person, third person. Okay. Something that is pointed out here, because the verb includes the, as you just saw, since the verb includes the different pronouns with it. So grapho always means I write, whether the word I is there or not. You don't necessarily have to have the pronoun there. Su graphes is you. Technically, this would be you and you write. So the presence of the pronoun is usually for emphasis. One of the things that I think of is the ego, eimi statements in John. So whenever Jesus makes the different I am statements, I am the bread of life, I am the door, I'm the good shepherd. Before Abraham and Isaac what were I am, all of those include this. Some people have suggested maybe you should add the word myself, so I myself am, or something along those lines. It's really hard to express in English exactly what this means, but the big thing to remember is the presence of it is something important. I tell people it's kind of like if you took your thumb and pointed to your chest. That's kind of what this is saying. I won't say it's a huge deal. It's not something that offhand I can think makes a huge difference exegetically, but it is something that's gives you a flavor of the language and helps you understand of, okay, sometimes there's statements that are made where it's clearly supposed to be adding significant emphasis. We talked about that. I went over that. All right. He wrote this, I didn't. Should have paid attention in school. You'd understand this better. Inflection is a form change, and the things that I want you to understand for inflection, the things that we're going to be looking at when we start doing something called parsing, is the case, the number, and the gender. These are kind of the three things that we look at whenever we're parsing that help us understand what the particular word is doing in a sentence. Went over the parts of speech. If you don't know these, I would at least take a look at that. Maybe even there is a book out there that he has called English Grammar for Greek Students that is pretty good if you have no clue. Before you buy that, I would shoot me an email first and just let me know what you're struggling with, and I'll try my best to help you. All right, Greek verbs, we kind of just went through this, but the ending reflects the person and number. You don't necessarily need the subject. And the same word for he, she, and it, you have to look at context to determine whether it's a he, she, or it that's speaking or being spoken about. All right. That was pretty quick, but most people who took the accelerated class, we talked about this quite a bit already. Like I said, if we have any questions, just let me know.